Seeing as Peacemaker's a comic book show, you know that it's packed full of references and Easter eggs to the comics and DC as a whole. So, we got out a notebook and a pen, wrote them all down, and turned them into a nifty video because, like Vigilante mercilessly killing people, or Harcourt mercilessly killing people, or John Cena mercilessly killing it on the keys, that's kind of our specialty. So, let's float like a butterfly through all of the DC references you might have missed in Peacemaker. And yes, there will be cow-sized spoilers in this video, that reference being one of them. Now let's start off with the more obscure references, because let's face it, they're more fun. In the very first episode, there is a very subtle Easter egg in Chris's trailer to one of the more obscure DC supervillains out there, Eclipso. Eclipso is the original spirit of God's wrath, and after his fall, he became an agent of chaos, possessing others in order to fulfill his nefarious needs. And the most notable person he possessed was Earth's leading scientist in the field of solar energy, Bruce Gordon. Now, while Eclipso doesn't make a physical appearance in the show, his image can be seen on Chris's dartboard, and it was actually spotted before the show's release by eagle-eyed fans. See what I did there? As it was in the trailer. But it's not just obscure villains referenced in the show, but obscure heroes as well, as episode 3 of Peacemaker confirms the existence of the superhero Doll-Man. Now, Peacemaker references Doll-Man by name, and the character, like Ant-Man, can shrink down to the size of, you guessed it, a doll. Daryl Dane was the original character to go by this moniker, and he was a research chemist who invented the serum that gave him these shrinking abilities.
Hey, Doll-Man, you ever meet him?
Doll-Man?
He turns small.
He calls himself Doll-Man?
Yeah.
When, where, and why Peacemaker and Doll-Man met isn't clear, but I kinda want to see these two link up in the future. I have a feeling it'll be weird, but kind of fun, which is Peacemaker in a nutshell.
You're welcome.
And back to the villains now. While Batman has an impressive gallery of rogues, something that the show reminds us of, not all of them are as popular or well known as the Joker and the Riddler. Take, for instance, Kite-Man, who's a criminal with the ability to fly thanks to a glider suit he wears, which acts as, again, you guessed it, a kite. Speaking of the Riddler, Kite-Man actually owes his origin to him after the man in green poisoned the rope on his son's kite, resulting in him seeking revenge and fashioning a kite suit to remember his son. While Kite-Man has appeared in animated form in the Harley Quinn series, he is yet to appear in live action, but the show does pay reference to him with a newspaper clipping pertaining to the time when Peacemaker apprehended him.
Kite-Man was riding a kite?
That's right.
But we're not finished talking about the obscure DC characters just yet. Oh no, 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 no. Like his run-in with Doll-Man, Peacemaker reveals in episode 4 that he once had to team up with Matter-Eater Lad, which has twisted his sense of what's normal.
No, Matter-Eater Lad. That's his power. He can eat anything.
And to be honest, that's for good reason. Matter-Eater Lad, also known as Tenzil Kem, first appeared in Adventure Comics number 303 in 1962, and his power is that he can eat anything, and I mean anything. Well, you know, I hope except what Peacemaker read about Superman, if you know what I mean. No matter how dangerous or disgusting the object is, this guy can eat it, and Matter-Eater Lad is often part of the legion of superheroes in the comics.
His name is Matter-Eater Lad?
Yeah, with all that's going on, why are you so interested in him?
Whether the two teamed up in Peacemaker's Task Force X days or before is unclear, but I know I have to see James Gunn bring this guy to life. It'll be undoubtedly hilarious. Speaking of episode 4, if you look at the posters on the outside of Task Force X's undercover building as Peacemaker chases down Judomaster, you'll see one that reads Cerberus with a 3-headed dog beneath it. In the comics, Cerberus is the ferocious 3-headed hellhound that guards the bronze gates of the underworld under the rule of Hades and is based on the creature from Greek mythology. The Devil Dog has fought many characters in DC's library, including Peacemaker's old pal Aquaman, but is still yet to be seen in live-action form. Now, once the reports of the missing gorilla Charlie were seen on the news, many fans theorized that the Great Ape would turn out to be supervillain Gorilla Grodd. But that was quickly ruled out after John Economos, aka Diebeard, killed him with a chainsaw. But that doesn't mean he isn't a reference to Grodd. For those unaware, Grodd is an evil, super-intelligent gorilla who gained mental powers after being exposed to a strange meteorite's radiation and is one of Flash's main villains. Even if the one seen in the show isn't a reference to Grodd himself, Peacemaker saying that he fought one 4 years beforehand may be a reference to Grodd or another one of the surprisingly many supergorillas in DC. Moving on from people to places now. During episode 5, Myrn mentions fighting in the jungles of Nyasir with Locke. Now, Nyasir is a fictional African country who has a very powerful protector in the form of Jared Dale, aka Redemption, who has Superman-level powers and has even fought the Man of Steel in the comics.
Where do you get this nonsense?
Google.
Well, it's not true.
You know more than Google? Well, congratulations.
Maybe Peacemaker is setting up the introduction of Redemption at some point? Who knows? And another obscure character that Peacemaker confirmed to exist is Bat-Mite. In the comics, the interdimensional imp is a huge Batman fan who first debuted in 1959's Detective Comics number 267. And the magical powered being's existence in the DCEU is potentially significant due to his connection to Superman villain Mr. Mxyzptlk. Seeing as James Gunn admitted that he's actually a big fan of the character, we shouldn't be all too surprised that he was brought up, and he's another one who we hope shows up at some point in live action. Alright, now let's move on to the more mainstream references that even your grandmother, who doesn't know the difference between Captain Marvel and Captain Marvel, will understand. Now, if you look at the supposed Peacemaker diary that Adebayo is supposed to plant, you may have noticed the logo for the Wayne Foundation, which is, of course, the business owned by Batman himself, Bruce Wayne. However, the logo isn't like the one seen in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice or any of the other DCEU projects, and is actually more in keeping with the one seen in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. It probably means nothing, but worth pointing out. And now, speaking of Batman, he is famously the protector of Gotham City, and of course there are a number of DC characters linked with the fictional metropolis, such as Batgirl, Catwoman, Harley Quinn, and, according to the Peacemaker series, Adebayo. It's revealed in episode 6 that Adebayo and her wife previously lived in the city running an animal shelter before she reluctantly took up a spot with Task Force X.
You said you were a superhero like Batman.
Now, there's no way you missed these references, but this video is about every DC reference in the show, so they have to be included. I am, of course, referring to the call-out of members of the Justice League, such as Batman, Aquaman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and The Flash. In episode 1, Peacemaker says that he hates Aquaman because he believes that he sleeps with the fishes, and no, I don't mean that in the Godfather sense. They also bring up Batman and his no-killing policy as Peacemaker argues with his father's neighbor. In episode 5, Peacemaker reveals a disturbing, I presume false, fact about Superman that he found out on Google, that the alien from Krypton has a poop fetish. In episode 6, Peacemaker mentions that he met the Scarlet Speedster and thought that he was an unbearable D-bag, as well as kind of meeting Wonder Woman, saying that she spent an entire party eye-effing me from across the room. But I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and say that, like Superman's supposed poop proclivities, it's probably untrue. Now, despite how much he tries to forget, Peacemaker cannot outrun the memories of killing Rick Flag and his final line, "Peacemaker, what a joke."
Peacemaker. What a joke.
And there is a moment in the show when Flag's death flashes across the screen. But there is a more subtle nod to Flag that can be seen on Vigilante's dashboard, and that is the little figurine of Ultra Bunny. Ultra Bunny is a fictional character that James Gunn came up with in a doodle solely for the Suicide Squad, with the bunny being seen on the yellow t-shirt that Flag wears for the majority of the movie. The Ultra Bunny in the car is seemingly the English version of the character and is thought to be a reference to Superman with the addition of the red cape and one of Warner Brothers' most famous faces, Bugs Bunny. Meanwhile, fans have speculated that the slogan beside Ultra Bunny, "Obstacles are opportunities," is a reference to James Gunn's unceremonious firing by Marvel, which freed him up to make both the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker before he was rehired for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Flag was right. Peacemaker. What a joke.
Now, speaking of the Suicide Squad, despite there being many character deaths in the movie, 2 characters who seemingly died in the movie's run were revealed to be alive in the post-credit scenes, including Peacemaker himself. The other one was Weasel, whose survival left him free to terrorize the residents of Corto Maltese as Task Force X thought that he was dead. However, John Economos' line that he'd rather be friends with Harley Quinn or Weasel than with Peacemaker might suggest that Task Force X are actually aware that the Weasel is still alive. And seeing as the guy/creature/whatever you want to call him isn't exactly inconspicuous, there is a high chance that he was captured and sent back to Belle Reve once again. Also, who else thinks that TDK made it out alive as well? His screen never went red, and James Gunn did say that another character did survive the movie without us knowing. My money's on TDK. Now, we've already mentioned references to Ultra Bunny and flashbacks to Rick Flag, but another reference to the events of the Suicide Squad is the bullet wound that can be seen on Peacemaker, which he picked up after his shootout with Idris Elba's Bloodsport. The show does make multiple references to the famous duel, but this is the most noticeable reminder as it has literally left Peacemaker scarred for life.
You're the luckiest man alive.
One of the things that we see in the show is multiple versions of Peacemaker's helmet, although they all still look like a shiny toilet seat.
That's taking it a step too far.
In episode 1, we see the vast array of helmets that Peacemaker's father Augie made for him, all of which have different powers and abilities. Among them is Peacemaker's classic comic helmet, as well as another one that looks similar to the one from the comics with a tall fin, which Peacemaker's post-credits reveal gives the wearer scabies. Another one of the helmets is the Sonic Boom one that obliterates the butterfly that he slept with and scatters her remains all across the car park. This one is a reference to a helmet that Peacemaker does wear in the comics, although that one is a little less powerful and only has the power to temporarily deafen his enemies in his general proximity. However, while we do see a vast array of the character's helmets, we don't see another piece of his comic book equipment. A jetpack.
What?
Now, while the jetpack isn't one of the main staples of Peacemaker's costume, in the comics he does fly around in a jetpack, and the show makes reference to it early on when Peacemaker asks if he'll get a jetpack to take on Project Butterfly, which he assumes is the DCEU's equivalent of Mothra. Now, I kind of want to see Peacemaker take on Mothra. I think that'd be pretty cool. I mean, if The Rock can take on a giant crocodile in Rampage, why can't Cena take on a giant moth? One of the biggest introductions of a DC character in the show is that of Na Lee's Judomaster. In the comics, there have been 4 characters that have gone by that title, but the 2 most famous ones are Ripley Rip Jagger and his son Tommy Jagger, and as you guessed, they are both very familiar with martial arts. In the comics, Rip Jagger was a sergeant in World War II in the United States Army and rescued the daughter of a Pacific Island chief who in return taught him the martial art of judo. Speaking of World War II, Peacemaker's father, Augie Smith, also has his affiliations, although his are much more sinister. In the comics, Peacemaker's father is a Nazi concentration camp commander, but this was changed in the show where he's actually the supervillain, the White Dragon. There have been multiple people to go by that title in the comics, as it's a legacy name used by supervillains, traditionally associated with white supremacy, and the name is a reference to the Ku Klux Klan. The first White Dragon was Daniel Buchanan, who was one of Hawkman's primary villains, and he built the suit to channel his fire abilities, and it gave him enhanced strength and durability. Buchanan's successor, William Heller, was actually a member of the Suicide Squad, just like Peacemaker. Also, did anyone else catch the Raiders of the Lost Ark homage in Episode 7 as Peacemaker runs away from the white supremacists? That was pretty funny. The broadest reference to DC Comics has to be the one seen on a large moving truck in Episode 4. The truck in question can be seen during Peacemaker's fight with Judomaster and has the words Atomic Age written on the side of it. This is a reference to the Atomic Age of comics, which is considered to be from 1950 to 1960 near the end of the Golden Age, and gets its name from the heavy amount of sci-fi stories used at that time. An example being DC's Superman, The Atomic Age Sundays. Now I know this one's a little bit of a cheat, but I'm gonna go with it anyway because it's my video and I have some time left. So, in Episode 5, Peacemaker spouts a ton of names of people while ranting to Diebeard, with him directly name-dropping Riverdale. Now the main kids of Riverdale, meaning Archie, Betty, Veronica, and Jughead, are not a part of DC canon as they belong to Archie Comics, although Warner Brothers do produce Riverdale and the DCEU, so there is that. But anyway, while the main kids aren't part of DC canon, Archie Comics has licensed some characters to DC Comics over the years. An example of this is in 1991, when Archie's MLJ Superheroes joined DC as part of its Impact Comics imprint. Also, you know who else is in Riverdale? Lachlan Monroe, who plays Detective Larry Fitzgibbon.
I'll put it in my notes.
I don't know if that's a continuity error or not, but hey, the more you know. And let's end by moving away from DC and to their main competitors, Marvel. In Episode 7, Peacemaker and co. use a raccoon as a decoy as they try to escape from White Dragon and his crew. Seeing as James Gunn is also the man behind Guardians of the Galaxy, is this a subtle nod to everyone's favorite raccoon, Rocket?